Welcome to the Dragonfly Rising podcast. I am your host, Dr. Tami Dean. Thank you for joining me today as we continue to work together to make a difference. Let's explore how we can use our voice today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dragonfly Rising podcast with me, your host, Dr. Tami Dean, and I am so excited. We have Miss Kelly back in the house with us today. You may have remembered her episode where we were talking about the book Wake and some things she was doing with her students. So welcome back, Kelly.
So happy to be here again. It's so different like the second time. I'm like, okay, I know what we're doing now.
It's like riding a bike. I could do this.
Yes.
No problem. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So one, if you haven't listened to the episode, highly recommend you go back, take a listen. But second, we're going to do a little follow-up. We talked about it on that episode. Kelly was in the midst of planning this course for her students around using the book Wake and was trying to make some decisions. So we're going to lean in today into what happened and think about, those students, her highlights, and those types of things. So I don't know, Kelly, do you want to just start us off with a kind of recap of your course and what you were doing with your students?
So this past semester, I got to introduce a dual credit course at my high school, Bloomington High School. And it is through partnership with our local community college. And it's history 135. It's like the first half of U.S. history. So like to the year 1865, like through the Civil War. And I was just thinking through some ways that I wanted to organize that class. There were kind of like a lot of requirements that I had to do because of the partnership with the community college. But I was trying to think of ways like to kind of make it like engaging and get some like varying perspectives, because it's one of those classes that's like very content heavy. And I was like, I don't want to sit here and lecture the whole class, and I don't want it to be like that. And I think it was just not this past winter break, but the winter break before, I had come across the book Wake, which is a graphic novel. And it kind of has like two purposes. It goes over kind of like what the job of a historian is in terms of like finding sources and what historians actually do other than, write papers. How do they actually find that information? How do they find sources? And then the other part was researching women-led slave revolts. And I thought that would be a topic that would be really engaging for my dual credit students. And I thought the aspect of like actually understanding what historians do was also very appropriate at the dual credit level. Yeah, so basically I decided that I was going to read this book with my students. And I did get to do that. Basically, I planned like 1 week and then a project around Wake. And yeah, so I guess we can kind of talk about what ended up happening.
Yes. And I'm so excited. And I will put a link, y'all, back for the book with the episode notes so you can go and check it out, because it is absolutely amazing how she's layered in these perspectives and into this graphic novel. And, pro tip, graphic novels aren't easier because they have pictures. They require some more inferring and those types of skills. So they're super powerful. So yeah, let's hear about what happened and what you ended up getting to do.
Yeah. So basically I decided that it was appropriate to like read the book with my students. I really wanted to be there to help kind of explain. I knew that it was a topic that they were going to be like, wait, what? Like historians actually do stuff? Like I knew they were going to they were going to have questions and they were going to need me there to talk about it. Like I didn't want it to be, here's this book, go home, read it. And everyone like doesn't actually read it. You know what I'm saying? Like I wanted it to be like a real
never happens.
Yeah. I wanted it to be like legit. So I spent a week, and basically like each day I would just sit down with them. I gave them all a book. I had a book. And I sat down in my little teacher chair and we kind of read together. Because it's a graphic novel, sometimes I had to do a little bit of like, okay, everyone pause, everybody look at the artwork on page, blah, blah, blah. What do we think is going on? So it was interesting to read with them, especially as like a social studies teacher. I guess I'm much more used to like, if I am going to like read with my students, like reading like a primary source of like all text. So that felt a little weird to me at first, like talking through what some of the artwork was showing and how like we were incorporating it into our understanding. But like throughout the week, it kind of got better. But my students were very, very into it. Like at first I felt like they were like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Like at first I felt like they kind of had some like apprehension. But throughout the book, I started noticing like their little reactions at kind of some of the shocking parts. Like I started hearing like, like as I was reading, or like some kids were like, "What? Like they can't do that!" Like it just started like out loud reacting as we were going through the book. So that process, like talking with them and reading the book out loud and kind of discussing it. I also had some like questions that they were answering as we went. So like after each chapter, we would pause, would kind of talk through the questions that I gave them. So that was the process of like reading the actual book. And then I thought the best part was when I ended up assigning them afterwards. I decided to assign them what's called an unessay. So basically the point of the unessay is like anything but an essay. And that was interesting to explain to them because they were like, "What do you mean? Like in this class, it's very writing heavy because of the partnership with the
Right.
college." So I was like, "You are allowed to do anything, but you cannot write me an essay." And they were like, "Well, that." They kind of like, again, had apprehension at first. But I gave them a couple weeks. I had a couple of check-ins. And honestly, the products that a lot of them came up with, I was like super blown away by. So it ended up being a really cool like experience for them, but I feel like also for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So a lot to unpack there,
Yeah. I
right?
thought I kind of
No, I love you can hear and feel the passion, right, around it,
yeah.
and that's so exciting. Like, I wanna come back to the reading because that's one thing that I think maybe sometimes content teachers in secondary are like, I'm not a reading teacher, so I'm not sure that that's something I want to utilize, but, like, touch base with your English teachers or your literacy specialists if they're there around some of the tools, and so as a literacy person, right? Like I'm hearing you share, right? Like naming and noticing, like what are you noticing and then naming it and sharing it. And to me, it sounds like you built a really safe space with these students. The fact that they're verbally sharing, like you can't do that, and are willing to connect. Like there's nothing better. I mean, I'm an avid reader. That's a disclaimer, but there's nothing better like when someone else is reading a book and then you get to talk about like the crazy whatever you've noticed or read in the book. So I'm curious. I want to come back to that for a second. Did they end up having like little side conversations? Were they in small groups or like what kind of happened as this catalyst of them getting really engaged with the book now that they're like, okay, this is cool?
Yeah, so this was my first time doing it, and this was my first again, like I'm a history teacher, I'm a content teacher, so I wasn't used to
Right.
like reading a book with a class. So I just kind of went for like what felt natural. We read it like all together. There was only 16 students in the class, so it was a small class.
Okay.
But to be honest, I guess I didn't even go through the process of like thinking about grouping and stuff. I think that's something I could definitely like think about in the future, especially if we're expecting our enrollment in dual credit classes to continue rising. So I feel like I'm gonna have to think through like or there are other ways that could group these students.
Problem to have.
Yeah, no, it
Kudos to
totally is.
you.
It is a great problem. But so yeah, we basically read it as like a full group all together. And I do feel like that group in particular was a little bit quiet. So I was really happy that I had kind of discussion questions prepped. Because I think if I had like gotten the chapter and been like, "What do you think?" I think they would have got a little scared at first. But the fact that I had prepared questions already, I feel like that introduced conversation a lot more than maybe it would have.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that they actually reacted a lot more to the chapters about Dr. Hall actually like doing the historical research. In the last episode, we talked about how she tried to go to like the Lloyds of London and they were pretty much like, "Nope, if you're studying slavery, you are not allowed to have our primary sources." That moment in particular, all the kids, they got so mad. Like I had to actually stop reading at that point and they were like, "We have to think about that." And then in
Yes.
kind of some of the reflections that they did in their questions throughout, like every single one of them wrote about like that moment. Every single one of them were like, "I just didn't know that sometimes we don't know things because historians can't get access to the information." And I was like, yeah.
Of information, right? Like
Right.
holding
Yeah.
it hostage. Like, hi, welcome to textbook publishing. Right. Not everything can
Absolutely.
be in there and
Yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
Just
And I had
them-
another student kind of have an interesting reaction. And it kind of made me a little bit sad. She was like, "Wait, so like, she's like, but like DEI like matters and incorporating all of these perspectives matter." But she's like, "But it never occurred to me that sometimes these perspectives aren't included because like doing the work is that hard." Yeah, it is. That is why well, for a long time, we've hidden a lot of these perspectives. But
Right.
even in like 2024, as these ideas are becoming much more prevalent, especially in education, I'm like, yeah, like that is a problem that we're going to run into. Like as a history teacher, sometimes it's hard to go find the sources that I want to use to talk about this topic. Or
Mhm.
whatever topic it might be, obviously.
Right.
But
Right.
that was a hard moment, I would say.
Yeah, but how profound, right? And I
Yeah,
think sometimes people don't give teenagers credit, but I think
totally.
teenagers are amazing, right? They're asking the hard questions. They're noticing these moments like, wait, why is that? Like, and that's what's going to make us better. I feel like in this equity work is these young people, and I mean, I still feel young, but these young people, like, asking these questions. So that's super exciting. So I full disclaimer, I love projects. I know that sounds crazy because I'm, like a literacy person and writing is fabulous too. But I just think I can't wait to hear what some of the things your students did because I feel like they just are so creative when we provide the right opportunity, guidance, like you're setting them up for success with their creativity. So let me hear more about this, like anything but an essay and how that went down.
Okay. So I actually was really anxious about it because I actually don't like assigning projects. Because if someone assigned that to me, I would be like, what do you mean I have to come up with something like that? It's so annoying. So I was a little anxious about assigning it because I was like, okay, like, is this gonna suck? Are they not gonna take it seriously? Like I wasn't really sure how to feel about it. I did already have experience actually doing something like this. So just this past fall, I was also teaching a class at ISU. It was the pre-service teachers, like the class they take before they student teach.
Okay.
And me and the professor I was working with, we decided to assign an essay for a book that they had read over the summer. So I did already have some experience with it, just like at a little bit of a different level, because all of those students were obviously like future teachers, they're seniors, they're about to be student teaching. Like I felt like the content that they were learning maybe hit closer to home for them. And I was just unsure like how my high schoolers slash kind of college students were going to respond to that same project.
Yeah, but
But
you took the risk.
I'm
You
glad
took
that
the
I did
risk.
it. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, I was cutting you off. I was just so excited. I'm like, you took the risk. I love it.
Yeah.
So you signed it and you're glad you did.
I am glad that I did. The process was a little tough. I did get a lot of them doing the thing that I would have done, which was like, what do you mean? We don't like this. Like a lot of the teenage, they don't want to put an effort right away, right? Kind of like that. Oh, I have to do a project. But I noticed that once they started talking through ideas, that I felt like they actually started getting excited about it. So I like assigned that the Friday that we had finished reading the book. And then I gave them a couple weeks because I wanted them to one, have the 1 week where they complain. And then two, have like the week where they actually think through, like, what am I going to do? And then three, have the week where like they actually go ahead and do it. I didn't necessarily want it to be like a super quick turnaround because I felt like then they were just going to put something together and be like, whatever, I'm turning it in. So I
Yeah.
definitely wanted to give them some like reflection time. And I do feel like that worked. I had a lot of different things turned in, which was very, very interesting. So I had one student do an interview with her mom. So the student pretended to be Dr. Hall. And then she created questions for her mom to ask her, and they like filmed it. So it was really cute, actually. Her mom was like sitting at the kitchen table, like asking her questions. And she like had her little glasses on, and she was like, well, I'm Dr. Fall. And she kind of was like trying to replicate what she thought this historian would have said. And I'd say she was like very accurate based on like the interviews that I've like read with Dr. Hall and stuff.
Yeah.
It really hit it on the head. So that was a really cool one. Let's see what else. I had a lot of like artwork turned in, which I thought
Mm.
was really fun. I had, let's see, one student did like a comic strip, but she did like a comic box of her reflection on each chapter. So it was like 10 total boxes for the 10 chapters. And then she like had like however she was reacting to that chapter, however she was reflecting on it. So
Mm.
that one was also really cool. Let's see, what else did I have? Um, I had a student create like a real work of art. It was like supposed to be herself. And she kind of had this really like deep thinking look on her face. And then it was all black around her. Then there were like all of these eyes staring at her. And I did make them, if they were going to make me something like that, where it wasn't obvious what was going on here, then I told them they had to do a little 1 page, like, how does this relate to what you learned? And she explained that she just felt like the whole time reading the book, like, wow, is this what really happens? Like I can't remember exactly how she phrased it, but it was really interesting how she reflected on it. She just felt like she had never thought about how everyone else in the world was reflecting on what had happened in the past. So she almost felt like she was like being watched. So that was a really interesting reflection that I read from her. But yeah, there were like just a lot of really interesting things that they did.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And you may not be able to share samples, but if you are, I would love to like link a few for teachers that are like, "Ooh, I'm interested in exploring this and seeing what kids could come up with." So I just love the artwork.
I also had a student make a pop-up book. Like it was like an actual book. And yeah, I was supposed to have this stuff. I was supposed to be in my classroom, but it was negative 35 degrees this morning. So we went to school today. But there was like this pop-up book where the student was kind of showing how she was reacting to what had happened in Wake. I had another student do a playlist, which I thought was really, really cool. So basically what he did was he thought through like each of the chapters. He thought about a major theme from the chapter and then paired it with like a song that was kind of talking about that same theme. So like if he felt like the theme was like racism, then he would be like, this song that I know of also talks about racism. So here's how I think it like could connect to the book. So that was also really cool.
That is super cool. We love a good book playlist. And I've noticed some authors have been doing that lately. So we should share that with Dr. Hall. Maybe she could add his playlist. Did he put it on Spotify? Is that what he did? Or did he?
No, I think he made like a PowerPoint. So it was kind of like a slide with like the song and then like kind of his explanation of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. We could maybe make a little Spotify list of his and share it with Dr. Hall for him and see if she can add it.
That would
I
be
love
cute.
that. I know. Wouldn't that be awesome? Like,
Yeah. Okay.
I would love that. Dr. Hall, hopefully you're listening and you want to use his playlist to market your book because people connect with music, right? Art and music, really, and this is why art and music is so important to keep in our schools. Side plug right there. Okay. So important.
Absolutely. And I just felt like I appreciated it so much because it showed me, I felt like it made their like reflections so much more like raw and real. They obviously are writing a lot of papers in this class because it's a dual credit class. And sometimes I'm just, okay, I just feel like I don't get that in the paper always. Like obviously they're doing those historical thinking skills. They're analyzing sources. They're using that to like answer a question or whatever they're doing in the paper. But I feel like sometimes it misses them and what they are actually learning from the process. Yeah. So that's kind of why I'm happy that I went with the essay, because it just kind of gave a different perspective that I wasn't necessarily seeing in any other way in the class.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that because really, how and where are we providing space for students to bring in their ways of knowing and being and acting in the world with what we're asking them to do and to show, right? So that balance between sometimes there are certain ways we need to do something, but sometimes we have an opportunity such as this to allow a little more creativity and freedom. So curious, as you kind of think about the course and it's over at this point, what are some of the things you heard from your students? What are some particular highlights for yourself?
So the course ended in December, but now I'm doing a new semester of it. So I get to do it all over again with a new group of students. I did notice that they had to do what do you call it in college when you like rate the course at the end? Course evaluation. So they did have to do that. And then I got access to like what they had written later. And like almost every single one of them were like, I really liked that book we read. So, like, it was literally between, like, I took this class because I like Miss Rams, and then they were like, "I really like that book." And I was like, "It's funny that not a single one of them said anything about my lectures or, the papers they wrote." I was like, it was all the book.
Right, but okay, let's be honest. Do you do you are like, "Oh, that lecture was so
Right,
amazing."
no, that's my point. Like, when they leave the class, like, that is not what I'm expecting them to remember, because that's just the academic skill of going to school and listening versus, like, actually engaging with a text and actually engaging with, like, the history and doing it in a way that allows them a chance to actually reflect on, like, what did I learn? What actually matters to me in that book?
Yeah.
I feel like that was why that experience was what they're gonna leave the class, like, thinking about, just because it's so much more personal than, like, a lot of the other activities we can do and we do as teachers. Those things
Yeah.
are important too, but often it's not what students, like, reflect on later. So,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
glad I did it because yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that fosters, right, that community building and that passion for the learning, right? And it makes learners, in this case, look at history a little differently and from a different perspective from maybe they did before. Almost really getting into a better understanding because it has that personal connection with the why, like why these primary source documents are important, why hearing and understanding and knowing different persons' viewpoints of historical events is important because, right, they're sitting in this classroom, you've built this community, and they're seeing these 16 different perspectives of the exact same text come out. And I would imagine, if I have to guess, I haven't looked at your projects, but I'm going to guess that each of them didn't choose the same piece of the book to reflect on. They all kind of probably chose something a little bit unique.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the ones that created their own, specifically like the artwork type of pieces or like the drawing type of pieces. Those I feel like really showed like the individualism in like what aspects of the book they like really connected with. Again, there was the girl who decided to go with, well, every single chapter, here's what I thought. And then there was this other girl who took it in the direction of, wow, like I feel so small now. There's all these other people like looking at me. This is what happens in the world. And I'm just this person who's like, oh my God, I had no idea. So it's
Mhm.
just so interesting how they went in so many different directions.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely some highlights. Sounds like the unessay project, the unexpected connections of students talking, like, no way. I do love that. I do love that part because even I, the Lloyds of London part, I was like, no, that's not okay. I mean, and you and I talked about it too. I was like,
Yeah.
no, that's just not okay. And if you haven't read the book, this is just, again, a short, you should just need to. You just need to read it. And then, we can have a little book group or something because I would love to chat with about this book more because I love it.
Yeah.
So lessons learned, planning, you took some risks. There's always the first time you teach anything, right? It never goes exactly the way you planned usually.
Right.
Um, so what did you want to keep going into this semester? What did you shift? What is kind of your hope as you're trying round two?
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to be doing the book again. I feel like that is like definitely going to stay a staple. And I feel like I knew that from the beginning. Like it was an engaging enough book that I thought that if I was going to implement it, I just had good feelings about it. I knew that that was going to engage teenagers. So I don't necessarily think it's shocking that I want to keep going with the book. But I think you did bring up an interesting point about like maybe trying out some like different ways of reading it, maybe do like some groupings, maybe do some type of like reflection activities. I obviously went really like simple with it the first time of like, all right, let's just sit, let's read, let's talk about these questions. And it just kind of like ended up having organic conversation. But
Yeah.
I think there could be some more creative ways that I could go about that. Um, and then I feel like the unessay, I do want to keep doing that. I did obviously like there were a couple that, oh wow, I feel like this kid could have like come up with something better. There were some times where I was like, man, I feel like this person made this in like 5 seconds last night, but I kind of knew that going into the project. Not everything is going to be perfect.
Mhm.
But I felt like it was worth that kind of risk Especially because it's a very like open-ended project. I know sometimes I'm the teacher that wants very clear, here is the rubric. You have to do this and this and this. So the fact that it wasn't like that is what made me kind of anxious. Well, how do I want to grade this? Like if a kid turns in something that like I wasn't expecting. But to be honest, like I figured it out and like I was able to like talk to kids and I was able to ask, why did you create this? Why did you do this? Like, and I just feel like it ended up being okay when I had all these concerns about these things that like didn't matter in the end. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I feel like the lesson learned is even when you're anxious about something and even when you don't have like all the answers in the beginning of like, this is how I'm going to grade it. This is what I'm expecting. This is what I think kids are going to do. Like do it anyway, because you never know is kind of what I learned from the process. So I'm definitely going to do it again. Yeah. And I guess we'll just kind of see where it goes from here.
Yeah. No, and I think that's powerful advice because I think sometimes in the education profession, we feel like we need to have all the answers or know all the things. And we don't, right? We too can figure it out as we go. And I think it's especially important when your heart and intent is really in the right place of walking through that. And also, what a powerful model for students, right? Here I am, this adult person in front of you, um, leading you in some way, but I'm also admitting to you that there are certain things that I don't know and I'm willing to take risks. So we get to model taking risks and sharing and trying things for students too.
Absolutely. And it kind of tying back into like earlier, you had mentioned sometimes people don't give teenagers the credit. Like I felt like afterwards, I had caught myself doing that. I had all these anxieties about like, what if they don't take it seriously? And I don't really feel like that happened that much. I was decently happy with everything that was produced. I had some questions for some kids, but I don't know. I kind of reflected on it. Why did I think it was going to go bad? Why did I think the whole class wasn't going to take it seriously and turn it in? Why should I have those fears? So yeah, it's just kind of like, I should have believed in them from the beginning. And I knew that this was a class that was going to take this book seriously. I just from the personalities in the class, I knew that a lot of them were going to connect to it. So then why did I have these like negative thoughts? I'm not really sure why, but definitely I'm glad I did it because I was able to kind of disprove myself in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. I feel like my personal challenge to educators out there that are like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. If you're on this, like, I'm anxious, all these things could happen. Ask yourself, but what if? What if it went well? What are all the things? And also challenge yourself, right? To like articulate all the things that could go amazing when it goes right. Because sometimes we can be, what is that called? Where you um are predicting something bad's going to happen. So then it comes to fruition. What is that called? You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're saying, but I can't think of the word.
Um,
You're manifesting it. Like you're saying something bad is going to happen and then like it all falls apart because you didn't have confidence to begin with. Like,
yeah. There's a word. I can't remember the word either. It's eluding me today, but y'all know what it is. I know you know. You're like nodding your head as you're listening to me right now. You're like, yeah, that thing. Okay, so don't get sucked into that thing. Like, listen to what Kelly just shared with you, right? Like, move forward despite the anxiousness, right? And I think that that is true not only with when we're choosing text, but in equity work in general, right? Like moving forward while you're still not sure and growing and uncomfortable because of the marathon that is the journey to build this community like you've been doing, right? So I'm sure some people are like, oh, but you already knew these students. Well, she did because she built this community. So they want to continue and sign up for new learning opportunities, right? Like that's super
yeah.
powerful. And if you don't, then how do you build and foster the community within your classroom as you're getting to know them to open up space for them to show you them true selves, right? Because that's what that tells me. Like you have someone painting you a picture with all these eyes looking at her. That is a really deep, personal, vulnerable project to share with you, you know? And when we are, and I've said this so many times, but I really do believe this. When we show up as our truest and most authentic self, whether that's as a teacher, a student, it gives other people the space to do that too.
Yeah. And I feel like the thing that allowed my students to do that is that I was very like real with them throughout the process too. I even
Mm.
explained to them before we read the book, guys, I want to read this with you because this is a book that I read and I was like, oh my God. I'm so like frustrated, but also confused, but I have so many questions. And I'm like, guys, like I felt that way after reading this book. And I have gone to an archive and tried to find sources, like not on the scale that Dr. Hull has, but like, I have done that. Like I knew that there was kind of a thing, and yet still reading this book, like I was still so flabbergasted at the end. Like so much to like think about and take in concerning academia, the world, like how history works, like who is
Mm.
researching it and how do we find these things. It really like impacted me. And I explained that to my students and I kind of saw like the shift in them, like, oh, okay. Like Miss Shremsky
Yeah.
learned something. It's like maybe we'll learn something. Um, so yeah, I just feel like sharing with them that like I want to do this with you because it's something that like I'm actually excited about. I feel like that's what made the difference in the experience.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Your passion ignites passion and joy in your classroom is what I hear that. That's
Definitely,
awesome. Yes. You're like, yeah, I do that. Yes, you do, ma'am. You can claim it. Claim it.
I try not.
Because you do. So, I mean, I know you already kind of gave, a tip and next steps, and like next steps, you're going to keep on this journey. But anything else that you feel like you want to share about your course or um this work coming up?
Uh, I guess I just want to repeat. I've said it, but I want to repeat one more time because I am the teacher that comes up with an idea and then I like shy away from it because I'm like, no, what if that was bad? What if this? What if this? And like I talk myself out of a lot of things. So I just want to like once again say a million times that just do the thing. Like just try it, no matter what type of teacher you are. If you are a history teacher, you are a science teacher, if you are a elementary teacher, an ESL teacher, whatever you are, like just try it. And even if it doesn't go well, then you make changes and you do it differently. Or maybe you scrap it and you come up with a new idea. It doesn't, in the end, it doesn't matter as long as you are showing your students that you are trying. And obviously, like when it does work and when you do feel like it was a good experience, then it's like you kind of said, like it is that much better. So yeah, like just do it. Just do the thing. Just try the thing, see if it works, and then keep moving, whether it does or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. So, like Dory, just keep swimming, right?
Literally.
Just keep going. Just keep going.
That is not teaching, then I don't know what is, because that is what teaching is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And every day is unknown. We do this work with humans, and all the humans we connect with day to day are different. We all have different days ourselves as educators, students year to year. So there's always something different that's going to be going on. So I think your advice is amazing. Like just do it, just try it, just go for it, reflect on it and change it if you need to, scrap it it's okay to let it go, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got, right? And so, are you feeling joy? Are your students feeling joy? Are you connecting with them? Are they seeing themselves in what you're teaching and engaging them with, or having opportunity to share themselves with you? So I think all great points. I'm so glad we got to get a recap of how it went, because I also just adore and love this book. It's just so thought-provoking. Have to read it again because there's always something you miss the first time, right? On a graphic novel, and I'm sure you're thinking like, oh yeah, there's some things I noticed.
I absolutely noticed that. Like I kind of paused at some points while reading it. And I was like, oh, I don't think I realized that was part of it last time. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So the power of rereading. So we hope you all take the advice. Just do it. Just try it. Just go for it. I would love to hear more about what you're doing, and perhaps have you on the show as well to share what you're doing with other educators, because that's really my whole goal, is to share the amazing things that educators are doing. So please remember to like, subscribe, and rate on your local podcast provider. And thank you so much for joining us for our latest episode. Thank you, Kelly, for coming back. It was so good to speak with you again.
Yeah, it was really nice to be back again. I enjoyed it.
This wraps up another episode of the Dragonfly Rising podcast with me, your host, Dr. Tami Dean. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember that action is always greater than inaction. How will you use your voice today?